Good morning. Welcome to Oasis Church Hilo. And welcome to our Saturday Bible study that we always do at 10:30. Sorry, we were a couple minutes late. But today we're going to go ahead and continue with Genesis 38. Very, I should say, sinful when it comes down to the family. And it's sexual immorality. Now, I want you to keep in mind that God has not given us any guidelines on how to live. He started to do that when Moses came on the scene, and when Moses went to Mount Sinai to get 616 Levitical laws. In that Levitical law, you have the 10 Commandments as well. So when you read chapter 38, you're going to say, wow. And you're going to come up with basically the realization or an opinion of, wow, why did the Lord allow these things to happen in the human condition? But, let me remind you, in Genesis chapter 3, we have a fall of man, that Adam and Eve sinned against the living God, which got them thrown out of the Garden of Eden. And so we are dealing with this type of dispensation. And of course, as we move toward Genesis, we see that we see the flood in the Noah narrative. And then we see a lot of the dispensation when it comes to that. And then we propel further in as we move into the book of Genesis and Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and now we are in the story of Joseph, and it will take us right through the ending of Genesis, which is Genesis chapter 50. But let me just go over this this chapter 28, which specifically deals with Judah and Tamar. And so it's very, it's just a sequence of events that had happened. And so Genesis 38, where are we? Well, it begins with the phrase, "It happened at this time." And we all know that phrase, "it happened at this time." If you want to go further in the theology, we're dealing with this particular dispensation and this particular period on where God has dealt with mankind in its early onset. And so Genesis 38 begins the phrase, of course, "it happened at this time." It appears the events of chapter 38 around the time of Joseph, which is the beginning of the story of Joseph, which happens in chapter 37. Joseph was sold into slavery, again, chapter 37, and Joseph was sold into slavery in Egypt. And so, and it's around 1728 BC, 1728 BC. The characters that are specific to Genesis 38 is Judah, Jacob's fourth son with Leah. Remember, Jacob had two wives. And so Jacob's fourth son, Leah. Judah's sons, he had three sons with a Canaanite woman. And their names were Onan, and Shelah. Tamar, she was Judah's daughter-in-law, originally married to his son and that's E-R. And where does this take place? In a town called Chezib, Chezib. When his third son was born, Judah went to Timrah to shear sheep. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of where Shizib is, and it's in the vicinity, which is south of Bethel, um, and in a more southern area of Canaan, which is directly across from Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And north of that is Hebron. If you look at the map and how it is displaced with that. Um, Also, too, let me gather my notes too. The outline, starting out with verse 1 through 11, Judah's uh, one of Jacob's sons, as we specified, Judah married a Canaanite woman, and she bore three sons, which is, again, let me reiterate, Onan, and Shelah. Judah found a woman named Tamar. Here's where Tamar comes in, and to be Er's wife. Okay, one of Judah's sons. Was wicked in the sight of the Lord. He was wicked. He was a son that was extremely wicked, and God killed him. Okay, and you might be wondering, wow, there's a lot of things going on. We have sexual immorality. We have God killing people, where, well, there was no set laws back then, of course. Moses hadn't got on the scene literally for over 400 years. So we have Judah told his middle child Onan to fulfill his role as a brother-in-law. Now, here's where things get goofy, and have children with Tamar. Which Tamar, as I'm stating, and as you read 38, and I'm summarizing today, Tamar was Er's wife. So father gets involved, Judah, and says to Onan, the middle son, go fulfill, your brother's dead, go fulfill and have children with his brother's family line so it could continue. But Onan, whenever he slept with Tamar, and you can imagine that he was obeying his father, and this is where it gets really goofy, folks, and it says literally in these first set of verses here, it says that Onan would sleep with Tamar and spill his semen on the ground. And that's a little shocking, I know, because he knew that the offspring would be considered sons of his brother rather than his own. See, back then they had to keep the line going, and there was no, you couldn't. Again, the Levitical law wasn't even in place from Moses. And so God killed Onan because he did not fulfill his duty. Okay, he didn't obey his father, God killed. Again, we're dealing with a whole bunch of another dispensation, right? So God killed Onan because he did not fulfill his duty to his deceased brother and his wife. So Jacob told Tamar to remain a widow until his youngest son, Shelah, grew up. And this is talked about in verses 12 to 23. In the course of time, Judah's wife died, and Shelah grew up. But Judah did not give him to Tamar as he promised. When Tamar learned Judah was going to Timnah to shear sheep, she disguised herself as a prostitute and waited along the road. Okay, I know what you're saying. Difficult chapter to take in. So you have, again, sexual immorality. We have incest. I get it. But again, this was not, laws weren't given yet. And the Mosaic law wasn't, and the Levitical law wasn't instituted yet. So you have all these prostitution, you have all these women are inferior, you have all kinds of stuff, especially bunched up in 38. But don't lose faith now, because there's always a reason and a plan for everything. So she disguised herself as a prostitute. Judah slept with Tamar and she became pregnant. Okay, that's the father-in-law. He didn't know. He did not discover the prostitute was his daughter-in-law. Tamar's pregnancy is discovered and Judah is shamed. And this is in 24 through 30. 3 months later, when Jacob was at home, it was discovered that Tamar was pregnant. Jacob assumed she had been immoral and had slept with another man. He told his family, bring her out and let her be burned. Okay, so she was going to be killed. But Tamar revealed she was pregnant by Judah. And when she produced his signet, and something was given as I will pay you later from Judah. His signet and his cord, as you read on. Judah admitted she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. Tamar gave birth to twin boys and named Perez and Zerah. So again, a lot of moving parts and a lot of sinful areas where it's not accountable right now because God had not set the laws, his laws, and God dealt with humanity at that particular time. The application of all Genesis 38 is if you're quick to point out other people's sins without addressing your own. Judah was quick to demand punishment for the sin. He assumed Tamara's commitment, but he failed to address his own sin without withholding his son from her. And again, I put in play that the disguise of sin, okay, and we all do the disguise of sin, either in the past or even now. The disguise of sin in disguising your sin or having secret sin is literally the premises of 38. And as we move through chapter 37, chapter 39, where Joseph is thrown into jail. So when we look at the chapter, it's a vivid contrast to immoral character, the disguising of sin, and being quick to point out other people's sin, even to the damnation of death. And so the immoral character of Judah with the moral character of Joseph. Judah's lack of integrity resulted in a family strife and family deception. Again, disguising sin. When you have these when you have a disguise, or you're quick to point out other people's sins and not deal with yours, that's hypocritical. It's hypocritical. And so and I want to read this to you, verses 24 to 26. When Tamar revealed she was pregnant, Judah was unknowingly had gotten her pregnant, moved to have her killed. Judah had concealed his own sin, yet he came down harshly on Tamar. You see, there's a lesson to be learned. It's this. Often the sins we try to cover up are the ones that anger us most when we see them in others, right? Unbelievable. If you become indignant at the sins of others, you may have a similar tendency to sin that you don't wish to face. Wow, isn't that true? When we admit our sins and ask God to forgive us, forgiving others becomes easier. Ain't that the truth, though? We are quick to point out other people's sins. We're not quick in pointing out our own. And if there's a lesson in 38, chapter 38. This is the one. So when you read chapter 38, verse by verse, you're going to come up with your own conclusions. Wow, why would God allow this to happen? Why did God kill these two, Judah's two sons, in different time frames? We serve a living God, and what God did back then in chapter 38 is God's deal, not ours. We don't put ourselves where God is. A lot of people do. And because of our woke culture today, we have justified our justification in critical race theory, in all kinds of well, the gospel is twisted, and that's not what Jesus talked about. That's not what Apostle Peter talked about. That's not what Apostle Paul's talked about. So you have these theories on the justification of sin. But until we grasp sin and stop putting ourselves on God's level, which we never should, because that's our creator, God, the creator of the universe is God. Okay? Once we stop doing that and we fall on our knees and we surrender, the problems that we have today would be gone. But because of one man's sin and because he was unrighteous, and we have Jesus, who is God and man and is righteous and never sinned. And then we have another man that sins, that had sinned and propelled the humanity into oblivion. And Jesus on set came for us. We should be thankful every single day, folks. Every single day, and do what we can to propel ourselves and walk like Christ has. Are we going to hit the mark every time? No. Are we going to be tempted into sin? Yes. It's hard, I know, because the heart is evil. And even back then, before Moses got the law, the Levitical law, as talked about in the book of Leviticus. So before you pass judgment, wow, that's a lot to handle. Just remember where you're at. Just remember that Jesus came for us. Just remember the dispensation that we're at now. The dispensation that we're at now is the grace from God. My recommendation is going to the Romans road. What is the Romans road? The Romans road is the book of Romans. And the Romans road will tell you exactly through the Pauline gospel, Apostle Paul, it will tell you exactly where we're at. And we are under face because of grace, because of the shedding of the blood of Jesus Christ, the blood atonement. This is where we're at. So I would caution you not to make any judgments on chapter 38, because God dealt with them in his own dispensation. You see, and we cannot put ourselves where God is. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn in the Bible. And so this Genesis 38 is a good learning tool. Anyway, tomorrow we have live service again on Sunday at 10 a.m. And we're going to go ahead and do a preview of the Bible. And then we're going to get right into where we're at as far as our dispensation is concerned, which is faith by grace. Anyway, folks, I hope you liked it. Go ahead. I would recommend you reading 38, understanding 38. And if you're an overachiever, go to Genesis chapter 39, and we'll be there next week. Anyway, have a great Saturday. And I'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Aloha.